So I'd like to take a moment to introduce this item to you before the actual live presentation here by our consultants. But I'm extremely proud to say that we're here to bring a final draft of the local road safety plan before you for recommendation to go to City Council. So this is an effort that started at least the actual plan itself in April of 2021, so last year. And it has been a tremendous amount of work and effort that's been put into this, not just by our consultants, but by our traffic staff as well. So we have Debbie O'Leary here, who has been the person here shepherding this plan through the process here within the city, and then Kumar Nepali, who is our transportation services manager, who's been an extremely important person for this as well. And obviously before that, we actually received a grant for this. And so there was a lot of work that was put into that prior to even starting this whole process. So I just want to start by saying that. And we do have Rachel Ohm here with Fair & Peers, who is our consultant that is working on this. And with that, I'll let her take over and explain what this very important plan is.
So again, my name is Rachel Ohm. I'm with Fair & Peers, and it has truly been a pleasure working with the city team who introduced themselves. It's been a great partnership and an honor to work on this plan. So to start off, I won't read the recommendation again, just have it on screen, and I'll go ahead and get into our presentation. So to start off, just to give kind of zooming out, giving a background for the local road safety plan, zooming up to the state level, the state agency, which is Caltrans, developed a safety plan that's focused on reducing fatalities and serious injuries using the 4 E's of traffic safety, which include engineering, enforcement, education, and emergency services. Since the state is limited to managing state facilities, starting this year, Caltrans started to require local agencies such as Oxnard to develop a local road safety plan to help achieve the goals of the state safety plan. As Tatiana mentioned, to fulfill this requirement, the city received a state grant to develop the LRSP. And as I'm going through, please feel free to stop me for questions. I'm happy to answer any questions throughout.
Thank you.
So getting into what is a local road safety plan, this is a relatively new type of plan that's been required. So a local road safety plan, or an LRSP, it's using a data-driven approach, which uses collision and contextual data to understand existing conditions and key issues, and using that analysis to then identify and prioritize roadway safety improvements. Taking this data-driven approach allows the city to take a proactive approach to roadway safety, which we'll get into more detail as we walk through this report. Completing the LRSP is a requirement for the Highway Safety Improvement Program, which is a grant funding program which the city was able to apply for in September of this year. So getting into the plan itself, in the introduction, we go over that this is the city's first comprehensive safety plan. However, it's certainly not the city's first safety planning effort, as the LRSP builds on existing and upcoming efforts, which include the city's capital improvement plan, specific plans such as the bicycle and pedestrian master plan and the complete street safety assessment, and also education and enforcement efforts, such as those that are done by the police department. Oxnard's LRSP also incorporates the safe system approach, which I'll describe further in the next slide. There we go. The safe system approach, which is illustrated by this graphic here on the right, it's a roadmap for addressing safety from multiple angles using the elements shown on this graphic. Such as the safe road users, safe vehicles, looking at safe speeds, safe roadways, and post-crash care. And then there are principles written on the outside of this circle. This is a framework that's been adopted by the state agency, Caltrans, and also at the federal level by USDOT as a best practice approach for roadway safety. And this graphic here was developed by the Federal Highway Administration, also known as FHWA. And one thing I just wanted to point out is that this circular design really just enforces how all of the elements work together to promote safety. And throughout the report, there are references to these safe system elements. So it's really the underlying foundation for the Oxnard LRSP. For the LRSP process, we followed at a very high level 4 key steps. First, we worked with safety partners such as the police department and transit agencies to provide their input and also act as safety champions in their respective organizations. We then conducted a safety analysis to just really understand where collisions are happening, how they're happening, and when they are happening. We use that safety analysis to identify emphasis areas, which are the types of locations that have the most collisions and also the most severe collisions. We finally developed safety strategies that are proven to be effective to address the key issues identified in the previous steps of the LRSP process. In Chapter 2, we present the vision statement for the LRSP, which was developed by the LRSP team. So Oxnard will have an equitable, sustainable, and multimodal transportation system where people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds can travel safely throughout the city. So we have some images down here just to show that all the different ways people are traveling throughout the city. And this vision statement is something that we emphasize and also carry throughout the whole LRSP process. In Chapter 3, we summarize our collaboration with safety partners, which are listed here. We did reach out to a broad group of city departments, schools, regional agencies, and the final list on here are the agencies that were participating in our engagement efforts. So engagement included virtual calls, which included interactive activities. So one example is here on the bottom right. It's might be a little hard to see, but it's a interactive mapping activity where we worked with our safety partners to draw lines and drop pins about the key locations and the key issues that our safety partners not only identified themselves, but also heard from their community stakeholders. As part of our outreach and engagement, we also conducted a field visit, particularly with PD, where we went out to our priority areas and identified the existing conditions. Next, in Chapter 4, this chapter summarizes the existing efforts. So we really looked at the city's safety-related plans to establish a baseline for the LRSP. Some of the plans, as I mentioned, include the Bicycle and Pedestrian Facilities Master Plan. We also looked at the Green Alleys Plan, the city's Sidewalk Survey Report, and the Transportation Demand Management Plan. In reviewing all of these plans, our focus was to look for project recommendations that we could build upon. And the plans also helped us identify common themes that are priorities and also to understand the types of projects that would be best suited for the city. And just wanted to note here, starting with Chapter 4, we have images pulled directly from the report just to give a feel of what the report looks like. In some cases, I know it will be a bit difficult to read, but I'll be highlighting the key findings to walk us through the report. Next, in Chapter 5, we go over to safety analysis. The safety analysis, which analyzed 5 years of injury collision data, also contextual data, which includes number of lanes, location of signals, and the location of transit stops, and also input from safety partners. So the image on the left on the screen is from the report, which provides the overview of our analysis process, which I just walked through, and key takeaways down here in the red text. One of the key takeaways is that speeding is a top issue in the city, and that is why we wanted to include this graphic here on the top right, which shows the relationship between vehicle speed and the chances of a pedestrian or someone walking surviving a collision with a vehicle. In short, the takeaway here is that the higher the vehicle speed, the lower is the chances of survival for someone walking. So throughout our safety analysis, we identified several types of findings understand key trends and issues in the city from a variety of angles. The first is the development of collision profiles. So got a screenshot from the report here on the left of the 10 collision profiles which were developed for City of Oxnard. A collision profile, it essentially pairs a type of collision with a type of location. So for example, number 1 here, the type of collision is unsafe speed collisions, which are occurring in the location, which is roadways with 4 to 5 lanes. And these are the city's major roadways, such as Channel Islands Boulevard or Oxnard Boulevard. Another example is number 3, driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol. So that's the primary violation for the collision occurring at primary roadway intersections, which are essentially the major intersections in the city. These profiles were developed looking at several perspectives. One of them is looking at all injury collisions and looking at what are some of the trends coming from there, and then focusing on a collision that involves someone that's killed or severely injured, which is also known as a KSI collision. And then we also looked at collisions specifically involving people walking and biking, as they are the more vulnerable roadway users. So for example, going back to number 3, the driving under the influence, that profile came out from looking at the collisions involving someone killed or severely injured. So we have the graphic here on the top right, where when looking at all injury collisions, DUIs are involved or responsible for 9% of all the injury collisions. But if we look specifically at a collision where someone was killed or severely injured, DUIs are responsible for a larger share at 18%. And that really brought this collision profile up to kind of as a key priority to identify as a collision profile. And these collision profiles are developed specifically based on Oxnard data, and the improvements that are applicable for each profile, which we'll get into a bit later, they can be applied systemically throughout the city for that proactive approach. We also looked at the locations where collisions are happening geographically. The map on the right here shows collisions symbolized by their severity. So a fatality, or if someone was killed, it's in the red dots. A severe injury is in the orange dots, and other injuries are in gray. And this is a classification that's a standard used across the state. And many of the collisions happened at signalized intersections. There was a cluster of collisions in the downtown Oxnard area. And then specifically looking at collisions involving people walking and biking, many of those collisions were happening on the smaller residential and minor roadways. And finally, the next perspective that we looked at are looking at the citywide trends. So on the top right, this chart here illustrates the primary reason a collision occurred, which is called a primary collision factor. So in the chart, in the dark blue, that reflects all of the injury collisions. And then in the lighter blue, that's specifically looking at those KSI collisions where someone was killed or severely injured. So looking at all injury collisions, we have in this orange box here, the top violations are unsafe speed, followed by vehicle right-of-way. So that's an example of that is if a vehicle that's trying to turn left does not yield to a vehicle coming straight, and then that's followed by traffic signals and signs. So an example of that is a vehicle running a red light. The bottom right chart shows the crash types for all injury collisions in that dark blue again, and then the KSI collisions in the lighter blue. So when we look at the all injury collisions, the top crash type is a broadside collision, which some people know as a T-bone collision, followed by rear end collisions, and then a collision between a vehicle and pedestrian. We then looked at specifically at those killed or severely injured collisions, as those are the outcomes that are just most severe from a collision. So you'll see the KSI collisions that are ranked for the top 3 are in the red boxes, and they do slightly shift from those all injury collisions. So looking specifically at KSI collisions, again, the top violation is unsafe speed. That's followed by driving under the influence, and then that's followed by a pedestrian violation. An example of a pedestrian violation could be someone that's crossing in the middle of the road where there's no marked crosswalk. And then next, same graphic on the bottom right for the crash type, but then with the top 3 KSIs in the red boxes. So the top crash type is still a broadside collision. That's followed by vehicle and pedestrian collisions. And then the last third one is hit object. So that a hit object collision can involve a vehicle hitting a tree, a utility box, or a signal pole. Oh, there we go. So following our safety analysis, we present countermeasure toolbox in chapter 6. So one part of the countermeasure toolbox are the programmatic countermeasures. And each programmatic countermeasure has a description. So we have an image of an example on the right here. So for example, for this education and public awareness campaign, we have the description and then the agency that is best suited to lead the program. So in this particular example, the lead agency could be the Public Works Department or the Police Department. And then we cover kind of, again, the description of this program and then some examples and best practices. And that also includes referencing some of the city's programs. So in this image here, we reference PD's Know Your Limit and Choose Your Ride educational campaigns around discouraging driving under the influence. Another programmatic effort the city has going on now is the ongoing Safe Routes to School program. So on the bullet list here, that covers some of the programmatic countermeasures that are included, and the text highlighted in green indicate projects that are already underway by city departments. In addition to the programmatic countermeasures, the countermeasure toolbox also includes engineering strategies, and those fall into the 7 categories that are listed on the left here. And the city has deployed many countermeasures, in particular, the bottom 4 here, which are again highlighted in green. So for example, for the operational countermeasures, Public Works has been updating signal timing throughout the city. Under the pedestrian and bicycle improvements, Public Works has also been updating the pedestrian crossing time and then also adding or upgrading bike lanes. The images on the right, just wanted to briefly walk you through the different countermeasures that are presented in the toolbox. So each countermeasure is presented by having the title of the countermeasure, a brief description of what the countermeasure is and how it contributes to safety. And then there's also additional information that's relevant to filling out those highway safety improvement grant applications to aid engineering staff to determine which countermeasures are most competitive and best suited to address the key issues in the city. Next, in Chapter 7, this chapter introduces emphasis areas and strategies for each of those emphasis areas. So an emphasis area falls into 2 parts. One are those 10 collision profiles, which we covered in the safety analysis section. And then the other emphasis areas are also hotspot corridors, which we have shown on the screen and on the map to the left. So while the collision profiles are reflecting citywide trends, the hotspot corridors, which we have listed here, are specific locations outlined on the blue lines on this map of the city that have a relatively high number of collisions and particularly a high number of KSI collisions that are well suited to apply for those HSIP grant applications. Through this process, we identify 5 hotspot corridors listed here. So Ventura Road at 1, Gonzales Road number 2, Woolley at 3, Saviors Road number 4, and Bard Road number 5. And just to note, these numbers don't indicate kind of the ranking of the collisions, but it just served to help us identify the corridors through our analysis process. The intent of these corridors, in addition to prioritizing locations with the high number of collisions, we also made sure to look at a variety of land use contexts and crash types in the city so that these hotspot locations can serve as examples to apply like the improvements in other similar locations in the city. Number 1, Ventura Road, and number 5, Bard Road have a green star, and that indicates here these are the 2 locations that the city was able to submit an HSIP application in September, and city staff had presented on that in a previous meeting. So moving on in our chapter 7, each hotspot corridor has a cut sheet where we present all of the key information about that corridor and the recommendations. For today's presentation, I wanted to share Gonzales Road since Bard Road and Ventura had been presented previously, but each corridor cut sheet is found in the plan. So just to go over what's in the cut sheets, for each corridor, on the top left, we introduce key statistics, so looking at the total number of collisions and the KSI collisions, and then also breaking down to how many collisions involve someone walking and biking. And then on the top right, we cover contextual information such as the roadway characteristics, such as number of lanes and posted speed, and also surrounding land use characteristics, such as if there's schools in proximity, transit stops, and if collisions have occurred in a disadvantaged community defined by a few different state legislation. And the purpose of this contextual information is not only, it not only serves to identify appropriate safety strategies, but it's also key information, again, for city engineers as they prepare grant information. And then the bottom of the cut sheet includes key collision trends specific to the hotspot corridor. For Gonzales Road, just 2 key trends I wanted to highlight. The vast majority of collisions along the Gonzales corridor occurred at an intersection, and many of these collisions were either a rear end or a broadside collision. And also another key trend is that many of the pedestrian collisions, those occurred where a minor street that is stop controlled that is connecting to Gonzales Road. Continuing on our cut sheet, each cut sheet also has overview maps to show contextual information that typically generates bicycle and pedestrian activity. So this map here, again, for Gonzales, we show the location of retail, transit stops, schools, and parks. And based on the collision trends and the corridor context, we identified safety strategies that are proven to address the key issues. So on screen here, we have a few recommendations for Gonzales Road. One of them is to really enhance pedestrian visibility. And one strategy is to use high visibility crosswalks, which is shown in the upper right image, and with an advanced stop bar also shown in the upper right image. And also leading pedestrian intervals, which at traffic signals, which give pedestrians an opportunity to start crossing the intersection before vehicles are given the green light. Another recommendation is to reduce conflict points, and one strategy can be to provide a fully protected left turn phase to give left turning vehicles time to make that left turn and not make that decision of when to yield to the other oncoming vehicles. Another recommendation is to improve signal visibility. So one strategy to do that can be retroreflective backplates. So bottom right here is an image of the yellow outline on signals to illustrate what a retroreflective backplate does, really just to bring awareness for drivers that a signal is there. So these strategies are highlighted in green as they are strategies that the city has already begun implementation. And on top of those, just to highlight a few recent and upcoming projects, the city is adding a buffer to the existing bike lane to just provide a little more protection for and separation for people who are biking. The city is also working on optimizing signal timing. We'll also have pavement resurfacing and adding video detection at signalized intersections. So as you can see, there are many improvements that are underway for Gonzales Road. And the next round of improvements may come to Ventura Road and Bard Road with the city's recent HSIP applications. So that was an example of a hotspot corridor, and then wanted to go back to the collision profiles that we had discussed earlier. So one collision profile to highlight tonight are the collisions involving people who are walking and biking. and these collisions that are happening on the smaller roads, so the 2 to 3 lanes with the posted speed limit of 25 miles per hour or less. On the right here, we have a map of all the collisions that fall into this collision profile. And for each of the 10 collision profiles, we have a map that illustrates those collisions that fit in that profile. And then we also highlight a few corridors, and these corridors or key locations, those are identified as locations with just a large cluster of collisions that fall in that collision profile, and also relatively denser clustering of the KSI collisions. Some trends to highlight for this collision profile. This profile accounts for nearly a third of collisions involving someone walking or biking. And half of those collisions involved what we consider as vulnerable road users, so someone who's under 19 years old or over 60 years old. Many of the collisions happened at nighttime, at intersections, and on wide residential roads.
If I can interrupt you, if we can go back to
Sure.
that slide, can Diego expand upon that slide so we can show it to the public? And again, I just want to make sure that I understand correctly. The fatalities that are listed here are simply pedestrians and bicycle riders, not motorcycle riders, not car drivers or truck drivers?
I'm not quite sure how to zoom in, but to answer your question, these are collisions between someone who's walking or biking, so a pedestrian or bicyclist, with a vehicle that's happening on a road that has 2 to 3 lanes and has a posted speed limit of 25 miles per hour or less. So all of these collisions shown on this map here meet that description.
Okay, thank you. And I understand we don't have the ability to blow it up, but at least for myself, Mayor, I don't know how you feel. I think that these maps are something that should be shared with all the neighborhood councils. It should be on a city website so people have an idea, because you know, where somebody gets nailed. Most contact between vehicles and pedestrians or bicycles, we can pretty much common sense tell us who's going to be the loser. Thank you. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Sure. So for this specific collision profile, as listed here, the city really has a wide toolkit to address the pedestrian bicycle collisions. Just wanted to highlight 2 of them, highlighted in green at the bottom, as a way to address ped and bike collisions on these smaller roads. One strategy is to install flashing beacons. And so an example, there's an example here on the top right, kind of zooming in on that flashing beacon, where a pedestrian will push a button and the lights will start flashing, so that vehicles or drivers have a better just kind of visibility to see that someone's about to cross. And on the bottom right here is a flashing beacon in action with students crossing a flashing beacon crosswalk.
Mr. Chair,
I'm gonna, yes.
Rachel, there's the, maybe for staff, the flashing beacons I think are really effective. Now, because of all these data we have here, do the grants, can we get grants for more flashing beacons, which I think is extremely important, and they work.
Yeah, actually, Mr. Mayor, this is one of the major intents of this plan, is to be able for us to go ahead and submit for grant applications based on this.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Please go ahead.
Thank you. The other strategy that the city has already begun implementation are curb extensions, which help basically bring the sidewalk out so that it improves someone's walking, their ability to see oncoming cars, and then also for cars to see the pedestrian. So with the list here, it serves as a toolkit for staff to assess the conditions of the specific intersection or roadway segment that is being analyzed, and just based on collision data and kind of guidance on where these different recommendations should be implemented, city staff can determine which treatment is best suited for each specific location. So as you can see, going through this presentation, there was a lot of analysis completed for this study, and all of the recommendations were developed with implementation and feasibility as a top priority. So building on these efforts, we identified that the next step is to really think about not only how to implement the strategies, but also how to continue to make transportation safety as an integral part of the city's culture. In the LRSP, we identified a few key ways to accomplish this. The first one is to incorporate safety strategies into existing city programs, such as roadway design and operational standards. So for example, making it such that high visibility crosswalks are the standard for implementing crosswalks. Street and traffic signal maintenance is another opportunity to infuse safety programs, and also the capital improvement program. And the capital improvement program already has many projects that address safety. An opportunity just to continue to highlight safety could be to flag which projects are contributing to safety, just to really show that safety is a top priority for the city, and just kind of have that highlighted, not only for city staff, but really for constituents who see those lists of projects that the city is pursuing. Another way to implement and sustain that culture of safety is to continue to build upon the partnerships that exist and have been strengthened through this LRSP process. So not only between city departments, such as the collaboration between PD and Public Works, but also partnering with the local transit agencies, as there's a lot of pedestrian and bicycle activity around transit stops, and also partnering with community groups and schools, such as with the recent efforts around the Safe Routes to School program. And then finally, to continue to maintain a culture of roadway safety is to enhance the staff and fiscal resources just to continue to sustain these efforts. Some ways to do this, that can look like having internal safety champions in various departments, enhancing coordination between city departments for the information sharing and collaboration on projects, ensuring that there's sufficient research and preparation time for grant opportunities. And then finally, to evaluate progress over time. The city has so many great projects that are going on, and then implementing a evaluation process just to figure out what's working well, what could be improved, just so that city can have benchmarks to look onto. Let me go into the next steps. So just to highlight what Public Works has already been working on, which we've highlighted in the presentation. So the retroreflective signal backplates, adding in fully protected left turns at signalized intersections, implementing leading pedestrian interval time, and you may have also heard of those as LPIs, installing high visibility crosswalks with advanced stop bars and the curb extensions. So those are the current efforts that are kind of lower barrier to entry and easier to implement countermeasures. And then after adoption of the LRSP, Public Works will continue to roll out those easier to implement improvements. Public Works will also identify potential locations for additional safety countermeasures, and then recommend to the City Council ready-to-go projects for that next HSIP grant cycle, and then also review complex and high-cost projects for further out HSIP grant cycles and other grant opportunities, and for inclusion in CIP documents. So really the intent of the LRSP was to start as like the foundational document moving forward for the city to continue to build on all the safety work that has been completed and ongoing. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think it's excellent presentation. This local road safety plan is exactly what we needed here in Oxnard. One of the things that I'd like to mention that was shared is safety is the city's highest priority. Safety is the city's highest priority. So I think it's extremely important. One of the things that I wanted to share is in the education end of it, how do we educate the public to watch out for vehicles? We've talked a lot about vehicles, watching out and so forth, but we all experience, and I have to every single day, we're going to an intersection, there's a pedestrian, they don't even look back to see if there's a car coming. They absolutely do not. People just absolutely go right and cross without, if you don't stop, we're gonna hit that pedestrian, but I think some kind of education. I think you had it in what, chapter 8, where we have the schools and other agencies that can help us out. I think working with the children at school is really, really important. And I think those children then take the message home and they understand it. I think is really important. And also the bicyclists, I think it's extremely important that we educate this bicyclists. In fact, one of the things that probably is not here is, and all those kids that have been running all over town with bicycles running back and forth, and I think we need to getting in front of people, getting in about 30, 40 kids that run in bikes, which is really, really terrible. Somehow, somewhere we need to work with the PD on that. The website, I think, is really important that we educate not only in our website, but the school websites and the transit websites and websites that the public can look at. And also have the Oxnard PD, I think, is doing an excellent job at working with the county deputies and with the highway patrol. I think is something that we need to do. But I believe that all 8 chapters are really, really important chapters that we need to look at. And I think the 5 areas where we have fatalities, I think we need to really concentrate on that, which is Gonzalez Road and Victoria and what was it, Bart Road, and those areas, I think we need to concentrate on that. So the whole idea was your engineering, enforcement, education, and emergency plans, which I think is really, really important, and the KSI, and it's really, really important that we look at that. So excellent presentation, and I think that's a type of plan that we need to look for, the local road safety plan here in the city of Oxnard. So I commend staff, Public Works, Tatiana and Michael and your staff, and of course Debbie and the other staff that we have for the city of Oxnard is doing a good job. And Rachel did a really, really good job too, by the way.
Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on this?
Rachel, could you please close your presentation so I can see the full screen?
Yes.
Chair Perello, there's no speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Okay. Thank you very much. First off, tremendous presentation, a lot of information. There's a map, page 72. Granted, it's injury and fatality list from 2016 to 2022. That's a lot of people. No district, no neighborhood, no region, no wealth description, no socioeconomic description is immune from the fatalities in this map. The most accidents happen because there was an error in judgment. Somebody did something that they shouldn't have done, or they took a chance. And this is not like going to a casino. You take a chance, you're putting something else at risk other than a couple of bucks. You're putting your life limb in somebody else's life and limb. In my history living in this community, there's 2 times of the year when it's always, something's gonna happen, and those 2 times of the year are high school graduation time and the holiday season. There's gonna be some fatalities. People know what's gonna happen, people take chances, have a little too much fun, get behind the wheel. Recently, there was a function at a courthouse, and I happened to meet a gentleman who's a attorney, and I was told to talk to this guy a while, and he told me the biggest message that you can pass, and he says the biggest message he's passed on to his kids are 2, and he says he hopes that they listen because they're never within arm's reach, or they're never too old or too young to not make a mistake, as he's made mistakes. And those 2 lessons were, know who you're getting in a vehicle with, and the second thing is know who you're associating with. I have been guilty of running a red light. I've gotten a ticket for it. I've been guilty of, as these signs show, coming up and encroaching too much on a crosswalk. I've also been very fortunate not to get nailed right across the street, crossing the street right here, when, as the mayor has said, I pushed the button, the yellow lights are working, I think I got the world by the tail. The guy on the left stopped, but the guy on the right goes through, and then he looks at me like, what was I doing? And I'm in the crosswalk. And I don't need to be doing any sheet time in recovery. Things happen to everybody. This is a tremendous assessment, a lot of work to the members of the city staff, all of you here, and the consultant. I really hope that our city management can get these charts on the wall. People will go, oh, it's old news. Well, I know that our city is working and our police department is working with the youth. When you're young, you think you're invincible. If we look at the fatalities for the bicyclists and the pedestrians, we'll find out we're not. And we have a lot of youth that we're working with to try to get them to realize some of those things. But these charts, I believe, will be very important. Maybe not to the young kid, but maybe to mom and dad, and grandpa and grandma. When you get behind the wheel, you take a risk and you take an assumption, and as our Public Works Director made a comment, and I probably mistaken it right now, but the rules of the road, you forget what you were taught. You forget the obligation. When you get behind the wheels of the road, of the vehicle, the steering wheel, it's on you, it's a liability. And having insurance and all the other things that you need, from having been in a very serious auto accident where somebody was hurt, I'm sorry, does not make it right. When you look at those people's parents and they're looking at you and they want to grind you into the ground, I'm sorry, doesn't make it right. Things happen. I remember when one of the traffic engineers we had, Mr. Bokum, he made a presentation and it had to do with railroad and curves, and one of them was about Vineyard Avenue where it connects to Patterson Road. And a first comment out of his mouth, he was new to the city, and he said, well, one of the first things I realized in Oxnard, people drive fast in Oxnard. I can tell you, coming to work tonight, I should have been able to make it in a few minutes. I left myself that margin, and I can't make it in a few minutes, and so how do I do it? I can take chances. One of these times I'm going to lose. And you eventually learn. If you get old enough, you learn. The older we get, our reaction time, the eyesight, the time of day, everything comes into impact. The question I have for the consultant in a minute is the advanced stop bars. Exactly what does that mean? In years past, when they show the incidents of Oxnard and where there's more traffic, there was a traffic initiative that was put on the ballot. It did not succeed years ago. There's a lot of things that have happened, but progress goes on. More people driving under the influence. The voters of the state have made a decision, and our council made a decision, and I supported it. We are going to have more pot stores opening. We have the concern with people under the influence, whatever that influence, and the accidents. There is one portion of this report on page 179 has to do with the city of Philadelphia. And in the city of Philadelphia in 2021, I'd like to read this. In November of 2021, Philadelphia Mayor Jim Kearney suggested Driving Equity Act, signed the Driving Equity Act, which banned Philadelphia Police Department from conducting traffic stops within the city for secondary violations. Secondary violations included driving with a broken brake light, a single headlight, or a registration plate that was not clearly visible. The purpose of this legislation is to reduce the number of interactions between the police and the drivers, particularly as data had showed Philadelphia police pulled over a disproportionate number of black drivers for secondary traffic violations compared to white or Latino drivers. I don't believe that's an issue in the city, but it could become an issue in the city. You're supposed to have control of what you're driving, and you're supposed to have something that works. I cannot tell you the number of times that I come upon somebody and stop side by side and tell them, hey, your brake light's out. And sometimes you'll get hello, sometimes they'll go, they can't understand you, and sometimes you'll get a single finger hello. There are a lot of things with respect to the traffic, and we need to do this to help the residents in this community. But a lot boils down to, I'll never forget, a freshman in high school at Camarillo High School. Got into a hassle with, the gentleman, Reno Quintana. We were both suspended. And that principal, vice principal, Mr. Bertling Killingsworth, he told us, when you're driving down the street and it's an undivided road, you're trusting the person coming at you is not gonna cross that load and cross into your line of path, because all it takes is once. I believe this is what it's about. It's common sense. You gotta do everything you can, but you can't make the world perfectly safe. Our city public works and our city council and management are doing everything they can. I'm preaching too much here. A tremendous report, great work. We're fortunate to have these people work for us and the resources that allow us to do this and to move forward. But ladies and gentlemen, you gotta look out not just for yourself, you gotta look out for somebody else. Because the mayor's right. When somebody crosses in the sidewalk and they never even looked, it may really mess up their day if they get hurt. But if you are ever involved in an accident where somebody else is hurt, you won't forget. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I, one quick question. One of the consultant mentioned was safe route to school grants. Those are extremely important. So are we concentrating on those routes for school?
We actually have active state routes to school grants that we're working on from a design standpoint and eventually construction. And then again, part of this LRSP is for us to be eligible to submit for future grants as well.
That gives us the opportunity to do so. Because when I was with the county, we, the public works director applied for quite a few safe route to school, and we ended up with stoplights over on Rose Road, over on Rio Mesa, and over on Balboa, and some of those places. Even sidewalks were actually valid for the safe route to school funding, which I think is, in fact, over at Rio Mesa, we actually come out with, I think it was 1 mile or 2.5 miles of sidewalk.
Right.
You know, that was, remember from Strickland to Rio Mesa, there was nothing. The kids used to walk on
Walk on the shoulder of the
on the
road.
shoulder. And sometimes if it was raining, there was a drainage, and they had to actually walk on the asphalt.
Yeah, we actually have all of those active projects, whether they're sidewalks, crosswalks, and signage. I know that Debbie and Kumar are working on those projects. We have active
They're really important.
HSIP projects. You asked two questions, Chair Perrell. I want to answer them. You had asked a question about advanced stop bar. So if you can picture an old school crosswalk where you just had the crosswalk, what the advanced stop bar does is it goes in advance of that crosswalk to provide you a visual understanding of where you should stop rather than encroaching into the crosswalk. So there was a photo of it, but it basically provides another visual cue for the driver to stop here instead of rolling into the crosswalk or otherwise encroaching in the crosswalk. You had also asked about posting this information online, and this obviously is posted online because it's part of the agenda package. But once it's all done and finalized, it'll be on our city website. We'll actually have a dedicated web page for this, but in the interim, it'll be on our transportation webpage as well. So all that data, the report, all those maps will be available in that fashion. And maybe I can leave with one story and sum this up in this way. Probably 10-ish years ago and earlier, as municipal engineers and transportation engineers, we used to say the word accident. And that actually gave the connotation like, oh shucks, what can we do? It's an accident. If you heard tonight, our consultant and myself and Tatiana tonight and going forward, we always say the word collision. Because there's actually ways to address collisions rather than thinking about it as an accident. So this report, this analysis provides that transition from, there's not much we can do because it's an accident to, no, there's a lot of things we can do because there's different types of ways to address this. So that's what this report is about, is the data-driven analysis to identify tools for us to use going forward, to identify some of our areas to focus in on, as you notice those 5 segments, but also allow us to be eligible for funding through the state. I mean, that's the purpose of this document.
One more thing. We have another member of our council, Mr. Gabriel Turan, who multiple times I see him, he has 2 young girls, and I see him walking his girls to school, hand in hand. It's kind of I'm a lot older, but it kind of, like, it's pretty cool. Dad's walking his two girls to school. And he's coming up 8th Street and across Doris, and we're gonna cross, and a car coming from the other way, he's in the crosswalk, and the car's not stopping. And it's like, I know how I feel. I can imagine how a father feels if they were able to get their hands on a person. I'm not saying he felt any certain way, but I know how I felt. Everything we can do to protect somebody. We've had some, incidents in the city that collisions. I will try to stop using the word accident because you make a very good point. You make a very good point. There, but for the grace of God, could go me or you, and we could be laying on the ground. And ladies and gentlemen, an unpleasant thought, but if you've ever seen animals hit, large animals, small animals, people look just like that. Bad cases happen. It's not pretty. And that's one of the tragedies of being public safety. They have to deal with it. Somebody cleans up. There's always somebody that cleans up. Thank you. Do you have any comments more? Or
No,
does
thank you.
City Manager have any comments, or?
Just
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
very, very good
Very good.
presentation.
Thank you to the consultant. Thank you very much. You're very clear to understand. Very well done. And to the members of the Public Works here today, thank you all for everything you're doing.
Thank you, and I'd like a motion to,
We say- Second.
Member Zaragoza,
yes?
Chair Perrello.
Yes,
Thank you. Motion passes 2-0.
thank you.